Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or The Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down some humongous NFL breaking news that has large ramifications for the remainder of the 2024 fantasy football season. It was just reported by Adam Schefter that Davante Adams has been traded to the New York Jets from the Las Vegas Raiders in exchange for a conditional third-round pick that could become a second-round pick. Now, Davante Adams has seemingly been on the trade block for a majority of this season, and all offseason, the narrative surrounding around Davante Adams was that he was going to get potentially traded. We saw in the Netflix wide receiver documentary that they released regarding a couple of NFL wide receivers as well as George Kittle in the summer that Davante Adams was far from pleased, I would say, with the Raiders quarterback play. He seemed annoyed in a lot of the clips where he should have been getting the ball, or the ball's getting thrown to him and they're sending hospital balls his way. And it kind of just seemed almost inevitable, Thanos style, that at the end of the day, before the trade deadline occurred, that Davante Adams would go from the Raiders to the Jets, and it has finally occurred. And while this does have large ramifications for the Jets for the remainder of the season, right? They're 2-4 right now after losing to the Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football. They need a jolt to this team. They fire Robert Saleh. They end up going ahead and changing the play calling abilities from Nathaniel Hackett offensively to Todd Downing. So now we're sitting in a scenario where the offense definitely had some life in it last night. That huge bomb from a Hail Mary of Aaron Rodgers to Allen Lazard was a thing of beauty. Now, obviously, they still lose that game, but the offense looked promising. Breece Hall ran a train on that Bills defense. So how are things going to change with Davante Adams? For one, Davante Adams' fantasy football value has been revived. He was shot with a ballistic knife from Black Ops 1, but it was pack-a-punched. It revived what Davante Adams' fantasy football was. In Las Vegas, whether it was Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, he simply was not consistent at all. Sure, we knew deep down he was still Davante Adams, and there was going to be games where he drags his nutsack over the defense and scores 25-plus fantasy points. And because he's such a talented player, even in such a bad situation, he could succeed. But the problem was there was zero consistency. There were games where Davante Adams just wasn't involved enough, which makes zero sense when your team is as trash as the Raiders. They should have just been feeding the rock to Davante Adams, but that wasn't the case. Now he's on the Jets, where I believe he is going to stiff arm Garrett Wilson and become the #1 target on the team. And this is not me coming on here and trying to drag Garrett Wilson's name through the mud. I get that Garrett Wilson hasn't been the greatest fantasy football performer, but over the last 2 weeks, he has been a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. In London, he had 23 targets, 13 receptions, 101 yards, and a touchdown. Last night up against the Bills, wide receiver 2, 10 targets, 8 receptions, 107 yards, and a touchdown. So while this may take away Garrett Wilson's crown as the #1 wide receiver in the offense, this could actually be better for Garrett Wilson, because now Garrett Wilson won't have to face the #1 corner. It's not like defensive coordinators are scheming up to stop Allen Lazard. And while Allen Lazard has had a bunch of solid showings this year in prime time, Allen Lazard can't even hold Garrett Wilson's jockstrap. So now, even if Garrett Wilson gets knocked down a peg to being the quote-unquote #2 wide receiver, his fantasy value might be even safer now. While I don't think in a lot of matchups we're going to want to rank both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson inside of the top 12, I think Davante Adams could turn into a stone-cold lock to be a top 12 wide receiver in my fantasy football rankings weekly, and Garrett Wilson will be somewhere inside of the top 24 as a very, very safe wide receiver too, because again, if this offense lives up to the expectations that I now have on them based upon what I saw last night, and now injecting Davante Adams into this offense, I really do believe that this is a team that could have 3 fantasy football studs on it. Breece Hall, while there has been some rocky roads, some trials and tribulations, last night showed us what Breece Hall could be, and if instead of cutting to the sideline, he would have cut inside, he could have had a touchdown on that huge game as well. Garrett Wilson performs well. So the biggest winner of this trade is by clearly Davante Adams, because again, for fantasy football, he went from being a guy that you kind of had to start because his name is Davante Adams, but he was on a team that couldn't really elevate him. Now he goes to Aaron Rodgers. I get Aaron Rodgers isn't the same Aaron Rodgers that Davante Adams used to play with, but, and this is a big but, shout out Kim Kardashian, Aaron Rodgers is a much better quarterback than Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. So Davante Adams is a huge winner of this trade. Garrett Wilson, while he might see a slight bump down in terms of where I would rank him, in reality, he's not the number 2, right? It's 1A Adams, 1B Garrett Wilson, and now facing softer coverage, this could actually help out Garrett Wilson even more and make him a lot more consistent of a player, because early on in the season, Garrett Wilson was not looking good. Wide receiver 29 in PPR, wide receiver 33, 29, and 60. The last 2 weeks have been great for him. This also should help Breece Hall out be a lot more consistent, and the offensive play calling changing to Todd Downing did really seem to give some life to this offense instead of that stooge Nathaniel Hackett. So overall, I think the Jets, while it almost seemed like destiny getting Davante Adams, I think they got a good trade done. A third that could turn into a second-round pick if this team has Super Bowl expectations, that while they did fire Salah, and it makes it very unlikely that a interim head coach completely turns the tide and brings this team to a Super Bowl, their goal isn't just, oh, we have Rodgers, we fired Salah, it's over. That's not what they're thinking. They're thinking, how do we fix this mistake that has occurred? How do we fix this season? And I think adding Davante Adams brings so much to this offense. So honestly, everyone is a winner. Besides technically Garrett Wilson, because he's going to bump down the rankings, but I think he's going to be a lot more consistent. So overall, I think he's going to be a little bit more stagnant, or I guess stagnant wouldn't be the correct word. Stagnant almost seems negative, but be a lot more consistent. This is a huge move for Davante Adams. Great for Breece Hall. The biggest loser here would be Mike Williams. If there was any thoughts that Mike Williams could have maybe became great in fantasy like I thought, right? Garrett Wilson has been this great wide receiver for the Chargers for years, putting up huge fantasy football numbers. He is now DOA, dead on arrival. Allen Lazard, while he had the sparks, and he was a guy that you kind of were interested in when playing in prime time because he was a primetime merchant getting all those touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers has a fucking I love Allen Lazard tattoo on his arm, but now Allen Lazard is more of a prey to the fantasy football gods. Everything has went wrong. My whole wide receiver core is hurt. I'm going to play him type of play, right? Where it's like a YOLO last potential shot, deep shot from half court, full court, 3 courts over. This week, going up against the Steelers, even if Adams can play, I'm not that excited about the game, right? The Steelers defense is solid. It is on Sunday night, so now Adams gets a couple extra hours to learn the playbook. Ultimately, him and Aaron Rodgers will figure enough out to where Rodgers will be able to just tell him, hey, do this, do that, and they'll just force the ball to him. We already know that's going to happen. So if Davante Adams is able to suit up this week, I'm not going to rank him super high, but you definitely could play him. In terms of Garrett Wilson, you're going to want to play him as well, but the Steelers matchup is the best. Same thing goes for Breece Hall. So let me know down below in the comment section what you think about this trade. Did you see it coming, or are you absolutely shocked? I don't think anyone should really be that shocked, but there were definitely people out there that thought, hey, Adams, maybe he'll go to the Bills because the Bills won that game. Maybe he'll go to a different team. Maybe it'll be Amari Cooper on the Jets, but no, it is Davante Adams. Again, the trade is expected to be finalized today. According to Adam Schefter, it will be a conditional third-round pick that can go to a second-round pick. Let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think. If you did end up enjoying today's video, hit that subscribe button down below. There'll be a lot more fantasy football content dropped today, as well as throughout the rest of the weeks of the season. I love you guys all so much. Make sure to leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed. Have a great one. See you guys in a bit with another video. Good boy!